Senator Lankford.
Thank you. I need to ask you, in page 10 of your written report, you used the statement here, Iran remains the foremost state sponsor of terrorism. And then a couple of notes on that. I'd like to get some additional details on that. When you talk about Iran being the foremost state sponsor of terrorism, how far does that extend? How many countries are they engaged in, or terrorist groups are they engaged in sponsoring?
Iranian sponsorship of and association with particularly Lebanese Hezbollah provides a global reach to that organization. And so I could not give you a direct answer as to how many countries, but I would certainly argue that it is global. It extends to pretty much every region of the world.
Of places that we know there are clear lines where Iran is engaged in terrorism and advancing that ideology or being a state sponsor.
Certainly in portions of West Africa, portions of Southeast Asia, portions of Latin America. I could go into more detail in a classified setting.
Okay. It begs the question here as well, the foremost non-state sponsor. Are we able to identify individuals and groups of individuals as well that are, you identify Iran as the foremost state sponsor. A lot of these groups obviously have to get funding, support, coordination from somewhere. Are we able to identify some of those non-state sponsors?
We certainly have a robust effort across the intelligence community to try to understand particularly where individuals play a role in the financing of terrorist organizations, and where we can identify through intelligence those individuals, developing an approach using every tool we have, whether it's designation by the Treasury Department, other law enforcement or intelligence action, any tool we have to try to shut down that financing pipeline. That is an area where it is a constant struggle because these organizations are ubiquitous in their efforts to fundraise. I'd be happy to talk in closed session about the work the community is doing in that area.
Thank you. Is there a sense for Iran as a state sponsor of terrorism? Is that on the decline? Is it consistent as they continue to increase? Have we noticed a significant change in Iran and their behavior in the last several years?
I guess I would describe it as consistent and steady. The degree of concern we face has been consistent and steady over time. We're particularly mindful of their support for militant groups in places like Iraq, where that frontline activity where Shia militant groups that have connections to Iran could be potentially threatening to our personnel on the ground in Iraq.
Okay. I need to ask about one other country and location. Libya has fallen into total chaos with no functioning government anymore, and every time they form a government, it collapses within months, and we're borderline, as the Vice Chairman mentioned earlier, near civil war at this point. Terrorist groups seem to enjoy a vacuum. What do we see as on the rise in Libya, and what's our status there as far as terrorist organizations, the spread of terrorism there?
You're absolutely right, Senator. If I had to identify one of the greatest areas of emerging concern with respect to counterterrorism, it would be Libya. We were already facing the chaotic political environment there, in which the resident North African-based terrorist groups that we've talked about before, AQIM, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, Ansar al-Sharia, were already active and potentially threatening in Libya, and with the potential ability to threaten U.S. interests across North Africa. What's changed more recently, and what's made the environment there even more difficult, is that ISIL has looked to also take advantage of the chaos in Libya and establish a foothold there as well. We are still looking to try to assess whether that capability will manifest itself in external operations outside the region of North Africa, or if the intent is simply to give themselves the capability to attack Western interests in places like Cairo or Algiers or Tunis or Morocco. That by itself would be of significant, sufficient concern to warrant our attention, but we're obviously mindful of what they might try to do to expand into Europe as well and potentially threaten our interests there.
Okay, one final question. If Iran stopped supporting terrorism, what effect would that have on the region and on our terrorist operations?
Well, if Iran got out of the business of providing state sponsorship to terrorist organizations, it would obviously lower our potential level of concern about the capabilities of some of the groups that we worry about. I don't necessarily know that it would look like an on-off switch, though. These are, in some cases, relationships and capabilities that have developed over decades and decades. And so I don't know that that would all be unraveled and unspooled by just flipping a switch.
Okay. Obviously, that's not a switch that we have access to, but there are lots of connections there.
I understand. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. I yield back.